the Chicago Sun-Times newsroom, I'm Natasha Korecki, and this is Off Message, our weekly political talk show. Joining us this week, we have Assistant Majority Leader in the Illinois House, Sara Feigenholtz, and Minority Leader in the Illinois House, Jim Durkin. And reporting from Springfield, Dave McKinney, our Springfield Bureau Chief. So let's pretend that it is January 2015 and Bruce Rauner has been elected governor of our state. What does the makeup of our legislature look like at that point?
At that point, the House Republicans will have picked up enough seats to have broken the veto-proof majority that Mike Madigan has in the House of Representatives. And for the first time in many years, we're going to have some true checks and balances in Springfield. And I think it'll be a wonderful time and the world will change.
And how many seats do you need to pick up?
One seat.
Is this possible?
Yes, it is. It's very possible.
And which seat do you think you're going to pick up?
I don't want to give away all the tricks, but the fact is we're very competitive throughout the state of Illinois. We feel that the mood of the electorate is very strongly in favor of Republicans. I look at the polling information that we have, the generic ballot, and particularly in our highly competitive districts, it's very much favors Republicans, and we're seeing that right now. Republicans
get out of the superminority. How much of a difference does this make?
First of all, I'm not sure I agree with Leader Durkin about this. I think that historically we have very hardworking candidates that go door to door and talk about the reforms that they've brought home in the last few years. I applaud Leader Durkin for his attempt at capturing one or two seats. We may just capture a couple that he doesn't think we're going to capture.
How hard are you working to get these seats? How much money is going into them? How much resources?
I raise money every day. I'm not going to be able to compete with Mike Madigan's ATM machine. I'll be perfectly honest with you.
You've got Bruce Rauner's ATM machine.
I'm raising money every day. We're being very targeted in the areas that we believe that we need to be competitive. We need to hold on to seats. When we talked about one seat, that's all it takes, but I believe we'll do better than one. I think that we're apt to win 3 or 4 if things move in a direction that I believe that they will move.
Dave, what's Bruce Rauner looking at realistically to try to get any of his agenda through the legislature?
If he's governor, he's still going to probably be dealing with a Senate president who's John Cullerton and a House Speaker, Mike Madigan. I mean, where this issue of the supermajority comes into play, for the next 2 years when it comes to borrowing or when it comes to vetoes. Remember, in 2012, the House Democrats picked up 7 seats from the Republicans. So in what I think is regarded as going to be a Republican year nationally, I think there's some chance that they could pick up more than 1 seat.
How critical is this veto issue for Republicans?
It's extremely important. It's going to give Bruce Rauner the ability to govern. He needs a backstop in the legislature, and it's going to be the House Republicans who will be there, who are going to protect him on overrides, but I think it's going to give him leverage and the ability to negotiate.
So just picking up 1 seat will help take away at least some of the power from Mike Madigan?
That's correct.
I also think it's important to understand that there's a lot of collaboration that goes on, whether the political season will reflect that or not. I mean, it was Leader Durkin who was very cooperative in trying and working together with Democrats to help pass pension reform. It was actually Bruce Rauner who was in the backstop trying to sabotage it because he didn't want to give Governor Quinn the win.
Let's just clarify that for a moment, because this came out in a debate this week. Governor Quinn pretty much accused Bruce Rauner of trying to bribe lawmakers to vote against pension reform, and he attributed it to you. Did that happen? Was Bruce Rauner trying to pay off people to
vote no?
That
conversation never occurred. A lot of things happened during that pension vote, but the fact is that conversation never took place.
So did Governor Quinn lie?
That conversation never took place.
Bruce Rauner says, I want to freeze property taxes, lower the state income tax, all the while increasing school funding. Is this possible with Republicans picking up just 1 seat?
Anything's possible, but I think what you need to know about Bruce Rauner, anything's possible.
Is this really? You can freeze property taxes and decrease
Despite
the
what my colleague to the right says, I think that Governor Rauner is going to have significant, with House Republicans winning seats, is going to have considerable leverage to be able to bring forth his agenda, and I will give him credit. A lot of people will not talk about the specifics of campaigns of what they plan to do. Bruce Rauner has been very direct about what he wants to do for the state of Illinois. Let me just add, 14 years of one-party rule, it's been a disaster for the state of Illinois. No one could ever say anything other than that. Unemployment's at a record level. Look at the states around us. They are doing great. We have higher unemployment than the state of Michigan. That's an absolute embarrassment. We have not made any changes since that temporary tax increase. We've done nothing to solve those problems. We're sitting at over $5 billion of unpaid bills. I know all the promises that were made 3.5 years ago, and it's not true.
You know what, I know we work in the same place, Leader Durkin. I can't believe that you're saying this. We have actually passed pension reform. We cut Medicaid $1.5 billion. We moved together in lockstep in a bipartisan fashion to craft some solutions to these problems.
Let's go back to a reality check to Dave McKinney. How bipartisan has this Democratic supermajority been in terms of getting through legislation in the last couple of years?
Well, I mean, they haven't really had to be bipartisan. I mean, that's the reality. I mean, you know, there have been issues where 71 House Democrats and 40 Senate Democrats haven't been able to move the ball. I mean, the minimum wage increase is an example of that because, you know, on a lot of issues in Springfield, it's not so much a political divide as it is a geographical or an economic divide. When the margins were much closer, that you would have, you know, meetings in the governor's office at budget time where all four legislative leaders would sit down and try to hash out the details of a budget. And, you know, really over the last few cycles, that hasn't happened. I mean, some would argue that's actually a good thing. But moving back on an issue here, I would be interested to hear from Leader Durkin. You know, when we're talking about some of these plans that Bruce Rauner has laid on the table, the property tax freeze, for example, I mean, do you understand how exactly he would make that happen? Or, you know, talk about the budget. How would he make those things happen? Because I think we in the press here are all scratching our heads a little bit about the details because there don't seem to be any.
I can't speak to the details of what Bruce Rauner's plans are, but I do know that it's important that he's given the ability to govern, and that's going to be largely in part to having you know, some insurance in the House of Representatives. But I do know that the Speaker and the President of the Senate understand that sometimes you got to put aside the partisan differences. They're going to have to do it with the Governor Rauner and move towards trying to help people with property tax relief. Bruce Rauner at least said he's going to do something about it.
But even Governor Quinn tried to give a $500 rebate. Which seems like throwing people a bone. That didn't even get through the legislature, which is controlled by Democrats.
Well, let's just give Bruce Rauner the ability to govern. Let him do what he has planned to do, run the state of Illinois for 4 years. He says, give me one term. If it doesn't work, I'll move on. But the fact is, he's committed to turning the state around, putting people back to work.
You know, Leader Durkin, could I follow up, though, just quickly on back on the lack of details from Bruce Rauner? I mean, do you think that he owes voters an explanation of how he would make these plans work? I mean, again, you know, school districts, for example, are entirely dependent not only in your district but in the city of Chicago on property taxes. And you know, don't voters on that issue, for example, aren't they entitled before the election to know how a property tax freeze plan of his would work?
We're in the second week of September. I know there's going to be further debates down the road, and I'll let those debates, that's what those opportunities are for. In due time, he's going to be pressed on it, no doubt. He will be asked questions.
Well, it sounds like then you do believe that there should be
I'm just saying that he will. I believe he will.
Hopefully we're going to get some details because hopefully we're going to get some details. Mr. McKinney mentioned the issue of minimum wage. You know, Bruce Rauner is going to have some difficulty. You know, one of the things that he said is he would support lowering the minimum wage or perhaps eliminating it altogether. Those are some pretty hard words to swallow, you know. And
so is a temporary tax increase. Temporary tax increase. Right. And last May, we need to make it permanent. Real simple. Let's see who's been truthful and who hasn't. Temporary tax increase, the way it was portrayed to Illinoisans 3.5 years ago. Right. And right now they said we need to make it permanent. And nothing has happened in those 3.5 years. And I believe that Mr. Rauner is milling that about too, actually. That and about $600 million in service taxes as well. I mean, he's got all kinds of interesting ideas.
Well, let's go back to what the legislature is going to look like and Mike Madigan. We don't see much from him. He seems very reclusive. By the way, you know, we did reach out to his side as well to come on today, and he...
Well, here I am. You know, I mean, I can honestly say that the Speaker is probably one of the hardest working people I know. Clearly the hardest working person in the General Assembly.
So what is he doing now?
Well, he's probably reviewing bills because he reads every single bill that comes before him and probably looking at, you know, a lot of other things that are important, such as the pension issue and how the courts might land on their second opinion.
I thought he was traveling around raising money.
He's traveling all over the United States raising money. That's what he's doing.
There's a lot of money going on both sides, right?
Not the proportion that he has.
So you don't think that Mike Madigan's now just sitting at a desk reading over bills?
No, he isn't. No, he isn't. This is all campaign. This is about November. It's about that election in November. Well, that's what's going on
I didn't mean to allude to the fact that he isn't trying to protect his incumbents and protect his majority, but he is also a very substantive man. He takes what's going on in Illinois very, very seriously. I do not believe that pension bill would have passed without some strong arming and a lot of support and push coming out of 300. So for the Republican Party to talk about pension reform, pension reform, pension reform, and the person who wants to leave their party and be the governor trying to sabotage it behind the scenes, not exactly transparency, not exactly a clear message.
Dave, let's bring you right back in again. When was the last time we've had a governor who's been Republican who's worked with Mike Madigan as a speaker? And, you know, how was that relationship?
When George Ryan was governor, he was a Republican, of course, and Speaker Madigan held the majorities both those times. You know, both those guys got along famously well. And I mean, if you go in the Speaker's office, I presume it's still hanging on the wall. There's a picture of the Speaker and George Ryan at a press conference together. I mean, there's just there was genuine affection between the two of them. You know, you go back before that, Jim Edgar had to deal with Speaker Madigan as well. And there was a little more conflict in that relationship, but still they worked together on things. The school funding tax swap, for example, they worked together. If I could pivot back on a point here, I'd like to hear Representative Feigenholtz's view on this regarding Speaker Madigan and his efforts to help Governor Quinn be reelected. Are you satisfied that he's playing a large enough role in promoting Pat Quinn for reelection? I mean, there's been no Democratic Party of Illinois money to date given to the governor's reelection campaign.
But if you take a look at the history of the Democratic Party with Mike Madigan as the leader, I believe that there is a Herculean effort right now to get the Democratic message out and to define and draw a bright line in the difference between Republicans and Democrats, which is typically what happens in these kinds of election cycles. Do we want a governor and do we want a leader who wants to lower or eliminate the minimum wage?
But just to get you off the talking points for a moment,
lay off teachers.
Can you specifically say what is Mike Madigan doing right now?
You are going to see the party draw a very specific line between the difference between Bruce Rauner and Pat Quinn.
But what is Mike Madigan doing?
He's doing what he has to do to get the message out,
which is
working with his party leaders, township by township, ward by ward, precinct by precinct, because that's his kind of politics.
But you said you haven't seen him for 2 months.
I talked to him on the phone. Okay. He was very present at Democrat Day. He was there.
Democrat Day?
In Springfield.
In Springfield. I don't remember him at the state fair.
I'm sure he was there.
I don't think he was, actually, but okay.
He wasn't.
Quotes of the week. Let's go.
All politics aside, you know, I have to talk a little bit about one of my favorite people who died last week, Joan Rivers. And I don't have a quote from her because you'd have to bleep it out anyway. So it's an unquote, but God bless Joan Rivers.
Will you cue the flag, please? Thank you. America needs Joan Rivers.
I was born and raised as a Chicago White Sox fan, and I still am. I'm an alumni of McKinney's Tavern on 35th Street as a bartender, and I picked up the paper this morning. The Chicago Sun-Times, Darrell Van Schoen wrote an article on a team that is 64-80, and the quote was from Paul Konerko: "White Sox in a better spot than last season." I love Paul Konerko. I love him, and I'm going to miss him, but I had to use that as my quote for the week.
Oh. Good stuff. All right, Dave, what do you got for us?
I'm pulling something out of the debate between Governor Quinn and Bruce Rauner earlier this week. Governor Quinn said, "You made a fortune off the misfortune of vulnerable human beings and workers and consumers. You won't take responsibility."
I'll piggyback off of that, and it was a Bruce Rauner quote in the same forum. He said there was a lot of parallels between Rod Blagojevich and Pat Quinn, including cronyism and corruption. His quote was, "The only difference between Rod and Pat is the hair." Thank you very much to our very spirited panel today. Thank you to Dave in Springfield, and thank you for joining us this week. We will see you next week on Off Message.